Driving change in maritime. Welcome to another Vodcast of Teqplay. Today I will have a conversation with Dirk Robers, business transformation and digital lead at Cargill. We're going to touch upon topics on AI, about commodities, trading, and to see how that all impacts in the maritime space. We're really looking forward to this conversation. Dirk, welcome on the Vodcast of Teqplay. Really looking forward to have a conversation with you, but maybe good to do a short introduction of who you are and what you have been doing at Cargill in the last years.
Yeah, so hey, thank you for the invite. I enjoy being here and talking about this subject. My name is Dirk Robers. I'm Dutch, as you can hear. I live in the vicinity of The Hague, and for the past 6 years I've worked for Cargill. Cargill is one of the largest ag and food traders in the world. And as such, I came into contact with maritime. My role currently is I do a lot of digital transformation work. So focusing on optimization, how to clean up what we have at the basics, so the core, and then how to work towards the future. And presently that also includes AI.
Okay, cool. And one of the things I've learned when I'm entering into the maritime space, a lot of things are different than you expect them to be. And if you look with the experience you had at Cargill and the maritime space and the trading space, what is the thing that people do not understand or should understand about the industry and the maritime space?
Oh wow, that's a good one. That's actually okay. We can fill the rest of the day with this with this topic. So, when you look from one subject, if you take maritime, you think optimization of your vessels, planning issues. We just had a discussion on. Leading up to this, how many people are involved in orchestrating what's going on. But when you're working in one industry, if you look behind the doors, what happens at Cargill and their customers, there's almost a similar landscape evolving. So whatever goes on in the maritime space has its mirror image inside those companies, and you have different incentives, what they work with. So where you might think from one perspective in maritime, hey, let's do this together. There are different problems being solved or different opportunities being chased within those companies. And that's why you get friction.
So if I listen in to you say, like, there is a port call, it looks like one thing, but it is not really a one thing. There is another world behind it, which is exactly, has the same dynamics, the same complexity as a port call has in that sense.
Yeah, exactly.
And you should realize that if you really want to orchestrate that and want to improve on that one.
Yeah, you can imagine just, if we look at a simple example, go to a tennis match. Both players will be focused on their game. You are focused on your logistics, getting there, getting a sandwich, getting to your seat on time, watching a nice game. And that is kind of similar. So whilst the maritime industry is playing its game, trying to focus on getting things done, the others are actually focusing on completely different stuff on the same subject.
Cool. One of the things I think, if we talk Cargill, we're talking big size. Yeah. It's huge. It's an enormous company. Teqplay, small company. We, as a startup, want to do business with the big corporates. We've had this discussion also a couple of times, but I'm really curious about, like, if you think about this collaboration, those companies have been setting up venture funds, trying to engage with the maritime startups. Is that a healthy dynamic? Is that something that we as Teqplay should look for, or is it a complex one?
That's a good one. So yes, over the past 6 years, I've also joined quite a lot of innovation studios, VCs, and I think we joined once in rainmaking. That's where we met up again. And you see, there's similar to what I explained around. There's an incentive to, or there's a reason why you're at the game, either as a spectator, either as a player. So for smaller companies, startups, looking at the bigger companies does make sense from an analysis perspective. So if you want to understand the playing field, you'll have to understand all the players, what they're doing. From an opportunity perspective, though, I would say the life cycles and the change cycles inside of large companies moves at a completely different speed. Something that smaller companies I've seen are struggling with is, what's your runway? How much money do you have? A very simple aspect. If you don't have money, you can't do your thing. Larger companies actually don't have that problem. So whilst you're trying to figure out what is it that they're looking for, they're just figuring out how do I, in my messy landscape, make this what I actually like work. And that's where it usually also falters because when they figured out, hey, how does this work? 18 months later, and then you're out of funding. So yes, look at big companies. Don't see them as your primary customer. I wouldn't take a large company as a launching customer. Mm-hmm. I would take everybody in between. You have a faster learning experience. And it's not about failure. I hear this a lot, fail fast. That's not true. Learn fast. That is what you need to do. Have many interactions with smaller players. The big ones, interesting. Keep them aligned. Talk to them.
Yeah. And that depends on if you are still learning, if you are still looking how can your technology be of value, then this is the key point. And as soon as you figure that out, then is it then a right moment to engage?
Yeah, I think so. From a entrepreneurial perspective, yes, you should always be opportunistic. However, be aware that large companies have long timelines. Even as simple as, I sent you an invoice and it took you like 9 months to pay it. It almost killed me. Yeah. Right? So those simple things happen and they are a reality. So large companies, yes, to learn and look at the playing field, always think big, but play small. Yeah. So.
And if we look at the challenges that you have as in your role at Cargill or maybe the maritime industry, what are the challenges that you see the industry or a player like Cargill has and that is facing?
Yeah, so there's a friction. I've thought about this before I drove here. And that is an interesting topic. So there's a friction between every company looks for scale. So how do I repeat what I did before at lower cost? Which means I can utilize the same thing, just like a stamp, and just do it over and over. We in Holland, by the way, we build houses that way. So if you travel through Holland, 95% will look the same, especially internally. So you look for that kind of scalability. But if you look at especially the maritime industry or the commodity trading industry as a whole, there's a lot of exceptions. Exceptions don't play well with scalability because it's unpredictable. So how do you find a way of scaling your business with leaving room for this kind of mitigating space? And what you see in larger companies, when I talk to friends in either banks or Shell, whatever, everywhere, Excel is prolific. Why? It's flexible. So whatever my ERP or planning system can't do, I'll do an exception sheet. It's here. I can see it. I can manage it. And that's a big threat, right? So it goes against scalability because you create data silos. There's a lack of transparency. You can't see entirely through your company. But it's one of the cheapest and easiest tools to just, at a whim, you can be on the phone and start typing in an Excel sheet.
Yeah. And do you consider that is the Excel sheet you a challenge then
yes.
at Cargill?
Yeah, definitely. So when currently we're looking at our core systems do certain transformations to the numbers that people are plugging in. And some of those transformations, and there are gazillions of them, some are actually wrong. And they end up showing wrong numbers in reports. The mitigation strategy of people is very simple. I have an Excel sheet. I open up my laptop. I know this number is wrong. I plug in the wrong number and I correct it. So on top of your regular, how is my company doing, you have a extra kind of reporting layer that says, well, it looks like this, but let's correct it. Okay. And that's a big struggle.
And how do you deal with that? With that? Yeah, I think it will remain because it's fixing a problem. But how do you deal with that?
It's weird. So I work mainly with the digital space. That is absolutely true. Usually, if you want to make something scalable, you're not going to build it by hand. You want to have a repeat business on digital stuff. However, that digital thing is actually not that complex if you just unpeel it and look at the bare bones of it. You can take a car apart. In the end, it's just parts and screws. It's not complex. When it's together, it looks like really complex. Digital is actually the same. And what you find is getting people to believe that by fixing really mundane stuff, which does take time because systems are big, you get a better outcome. And you lose some of those Excel sheets that actually create havoc at the end of the month or at the end of the year. The story part and the people part is way more difficult than doing the digital part. It's costly, but you do it once.
Yeah, and Lean is one of the methodologies that is being used. Is that something that you are using in these type of transformations as well, or is that more on the operational or production side?
Yeah. So what you come across in large companies, and that is not particular to Cargill. So talking to peers in other industries, you come to the same. There are many strategies to do something. So. Lean, for instance, is a strategy or a model you can follow if the outcome is still quite uncertain. You have an idea what the North Star is. Hey, we want to have, less operational errors, less cost. That's important to us. How we're going to achieve it, it's quite uncertain. So you have to go through your entire end-to-end supply chain to look for those opportunities. Then Lean is helpful because it offers a quite academic way of approaching issues, which is, I think it's here, and you do a small excursion into the problem and so on. So before you scale up, you have de-risk part of your journey. If the outcome is known, so we're going to deploy Office 365 again.
Yeah.
What is unknown?
With Excel.
Maybe the people that you work with or whatever system they are utilizing and some hosting issues. But what that thing should do in the end is 100% determined. I would use any of the old-fashioned ones, so Six Sigma, whatever you want to do, something, or just plain program management, which is just do it.
Step by step.
Step by step. But there's way less uncertainty. Lean or Scrum, what people use, doesn't make sense. Scrum is a recursive way of looking what you did so that you can correct it. But if you don't know, what Word looks like at the end, if that is a question to you, then I would first start, okay, what does Word actually do?
Yeah, that makes sense. If you have this clear North Pole, this clear endpoint, or a process that is running that you can improve upon.
Exactly. Yeah.
I feel that one as well. Maybe let's zoom out one level out of the processes and move a bit into the information space. Cargill is a big commodity trader, but if you look at the information space, commoditization of technology, commoditization of information is as well happening. I think. What is your take on that? Is that happening? Is it not happening?
So. Data can be commodified, right? So I can run a DeepSeek search program, or I can use the paid subscription of ChatGPT to say each morning, give me at 8 a.m. last day's prices on, and you can use Yahoo Business or Yahoo Finance. It'll just get some publicly available data to you on a CSV type of array, and you can work with that. Yes, you can commodify a lot of data way easier than you could. However, getting benefits or getting to the next step with that data is way harder, because then you'll have to do it consecutively. You have to organize your systems, and you have to build business logic that actually also utilizes that information to automate something else. If it's just to grab data and to look at data, well, by looking, nobody ever achieved anything. So that's maybe not true for people that are in zoologists or so. They look and learn. But for us, we actually have to follow up with an activity.
Yeah.
So if you don't translate that commodified, even the commodified data, into a action, then what's the value? Okay.
And again, you need this clear point of view. If you look at, you do it in the business transformation, the digital transformation, how do you select the things that you are going to do? What is driving, what is making things be put on the agenda?
Yeah, so to me, businesses in any industry almost are quite similar in nature. So they have their inputs, their transformations, and we talked about this once. And they have an output. That's the value that others then take. So in that transformation, you might do a lot of steps, so constructing a car. Mm-hmm. You might do just a few. You've read some articles, you make a synopsis, and you deliver an article. So that's also a transformation and an effort. You see, when you start daisy chaining a lot of processes, and some of them have data that they spit out and needs to be ingested somewhere else. In those processes, some of those handover moments are more costly to your organization. So if you look at supply chain, the supply chain back end or back of the house of companies like Bunge, Cargill, and so on are actually quite large. There are a lot of people just trying to manage how does our soy flow through our organization, but also into our customers. And there you look for where is, for instance, information lost, or where is information erroneously handed over. Those are by far the most useful cases to look at and zoom in, and then start to apply also what's the cost factor for me, right? So if it's a once in a lifetime, it happens once and it costs 500,000, which is a lot of money for me as an individual, but for a company, you can take the hit. But if it's just once, do I want to build a $1 million software system that I need to maintain for 200K as well? I might just take the hit. But you also have a lot of small mistakes. And the example I gave you on what we're trying to do now with cleaning up those basic transformations that systems do and cleaning them up actually led to a ballooning of people that have to correct those data points. And they have their own handover points. Looking at where can I actually kill that entire activity helps those people just do the stuff that they were hired for, not for handing over Excel sheets. So for me, look at where do you see the biggest bottlenecks, and are those bottlenecks valuable? And then zoom in. How can I actually prevent ever getting to that bottleneck?
Yeah. And then you do that in a top-down manner, or do you take a bottom-up?
I do both. So I look top-down from the business model. Which outcomes drives the value for a company? So, and then you have sections of, when you're selling, that's when you generate your revenue. Everything else is in protection of your revenue. It might sound, especially to people that are more of the business process organization, think, no, that's not true. But believe me, in the end, a customer pays for something which is on a bill, which is a service you promised. So everything else you do to protect that money that they pay actually delivers a nice margin. So you'll have to look at the rest that you're doing as a cost factor.
Yeah. You've been in this area now for 6 years. What do you see as the biggest innovation or the biggest success that you have seen?
I think one of the bigger successes that you can see is there has been a very slow but good progression of data is not just like spare change that you have. It actually can perform certain actions, certain activities, and automate stuff in your company that either improves your end product or helps you protect your margin. So in the maritime industry, in the commodity industry, that might have progressed way slower than in other industries. But you can see kind of a spillover from the B2C world from, hey, wait a minute, that's possible. There are lights at the end of the tunnel. And that change slowly has been happening. And the biggest failure is blockchain to me. Not because it's a bad idea. It's just there were two opportunities. One is, hey, it generates something that is immutable, which could be a coin, which is just a virtual thing, a large number. Or there is something that is immutable, that is somebody did a transaction. I can actually look back that chain and see that everybody has the same information, and it would help give more transparency, especially there where you bring a lot of other companies in. And that story has been lost, and it's been completely cannibalized by, hey, you can make money on a coin, which is idiotic. That technical part was the most valuable part, and we just, so in Dutch we have a saying, throw out the kid with the bathwater. Mm-hmm. Yes, we did.
And it takes a while before that.
Yeah, everybody burned their hands on it, so it's going to take a while. Yeah.
And the new kid on the block, and that in that sense is AI, which revived from the 60s to the now, and is really being hyped. If you look at AI and the supply chain and the company like Cargill, where do you see the opportunities?
Yeah, so one simple use case that you can see growing is it's quite hard in a large distributed company to be on par, on level, that everybody has the same information. Now, you could use an ERP system or so, you just look in the contract, but contract is not always the entire story. There are sometimes reasons, there are other emails that are connected to it, so you'll have to do a lot of research before you find out what the real play. Imagine, two of your important, one in Singapore and someone else here in Rotterdam, both get ill at the same time. And they've worked together immensely on the South Asia to Rotterdam flow. And all of a sudden, they're sick. Yeah, before you have the same level of information that they have in their heads, that lives normally in their Outlook inbox, that takes a while. So you lose speed, momentum, and also just the opportunity sometimes. And that is where systems like this, you can give them a data set. You should train them. That's one, of course. So there are many complications. Please don't just dump everything into ChatGPT and think solved. That's not the case. But there's an opportunity to make companies more resilient, and having access to unsorted data in that case. That's how you would normally address it, which is actually locked in semantics, language that we use. And that becomes recoverable as we learn more about those models, how they work. And I say learn more because some of those vector spaces that are behind it, so this is a technical part of it, are actually unknown how they work. They are vectors, but how they work together, nobody actually knows. And there are sometimes just a few thousand of those matrices back to back, and sometimes there are tens of thousands or even more. That you actually created a black box. So it has to be reliable. And that's where I differ. I don't think that all of them are reliable enough to do some of those more detailed things that we need to do in our supply chain or in invoicing, billing, legal questions, and so on. I would be more tentative in my approach.
This is really a funny one. One of the things I've seen in operational context is like if the reliability or the reliability of the data is not at 95% or 90%, but a very high number, people will just not use it because statistically it makes sense to use it and to use the better information. Yet if it's not that reliable, people will just not do that. Yeah. Do you see that same risk appearing on the use of AI as well in these environments?
I'm a bit more skeptical. So when operators see a data point, hey, the arrival time or what we agreed on the price, whatever is off, I can see it because normally this should be another number. Then they start to do I now have to check all the numbers every time? So what's the benefit? Let me get out an Excel sheet. And they start doing it again. LLMs have, for us humans, one fallacy, and that is, or big pit that we fall in. It uses words, semantics, and the model primarily first is trained on whatever you output, it should make sense as a sentence, not on content.
Yep.
So, can you retrieve the moments that you've talked to someone and where there was a moment where they slipped up? Probably not, because you have so many conversations. So actually realizing that, I'm now in this 5% space of the data being wrong, for you as an operator, especially if you don't have a full 360 view, because we don't have all the data in our brain, you'll just be faked. You think this is right, and you, in the end, will probably not be able to say, it was this moment. This was the moment that I got wrong information. So in technical terms, or they started calling that hallucination. it's just those LLMs. You have to realize if it writes, oh yeah, this glass of water in front of you, it's really nice and the water is tasty. There is no concept of tasty. There's no concept of water. It's just this token, this piece of word should be there. But I bet if you tell this to people, so technically, the system doesn't know what water is and doesn't know what even taste is. People start, chatting to ChatGPT and forgot about it. Just, oh yeah, hey, this is it. This is the answer.
So, but is that an advantage in getting things adopted? Where in the one hand there's a reluctance. Is it an advantage or is it?
It is as addictive as TikTok to kids. Yes. Yeah.
So that is one of the big advantages about the collecting all the data, doing the grunt work, that kind of. And I've proven wrong. AI has an advantage on that one. You really need to.
100%. Yeah. Because then you'll start saying maybe you start even applying personas to it. Oh no, it just messed up a little bit. But I then put in this extra Excel sheet and it corrected itself. It's way more open to being humanized.
How would you deal with that as a risk? Because as a big company, it is a risk if you take out that element of criticism. If you what are possible countermeasures on this one?
I think companies the size of Cargill and their impact on the global supply chain make them hesitant in adopting those kind of things anyway. So in our own organization, but also when I talk to, again, peers in the industry, it takes time before they start to apply this to really critical operations. So, and that is not just because maybe the technology is always wrong or whatever. It's just they know when it messes up, it could mess up big time. So I wouldn't send up a rocket with LLMs, for instance. The chance of it being successful is there, but it's just not high enough. There are people inside, so never.
So you get into the game of doing an assessment. What is the risk, and now the willingness to
100%,
take.
Yeah.
It's the statistical area again.
Yeah. So for LLMs being so convincing, you actually need better educated and more knowledgeable people working with the output versus what we've always worked towards, right? So even starting with Henry Ford and his conveyor belts, it just made the work repetitive and simpler. So I needed less skilled workers because they just had one thing to do. Ever since computers have been introduced, first it was to structure better the data and have cleaner inputs and more centrally available. And then it started to blossom into other spaces where it was, I can just make it simpler and my people need to know less. That will be a threat. If you don't have really well-trained people in your organization and they start to use these systems and they cannot catch errors, what's your fail-safe?
Yeah.
It will just continue.
And how do you train people? How do you get people? There is experience, kind of, right?
That's the key word.
But how do you gain experience then?
By having experience. It sounds stupid, but how do you train someone to become a Formula One driver? Yeah. All of them, since they're like 4 or 5 years old, have driven those little carts. Yeah. No exception. So you need experience. If you look in the academic world, it takes years before you've read all the subject matter, start to understand what the other's arguments were, before you start to mature with your own arguments. Yes, it takes time. I'm sorry.
There is a lot of room for specialists and staying.
100%. Yeah.
Dirk, I think I really want to thank you for the conversation. We're already are running over time.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Really interesting conversation, and I'm looking forward to more conversations that we will have. Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you.
Thank you.